looking, throwing in the end zone. Caught it! Montana, touchdown, John Taylor.
Young to the air, Young to Jerry Rice, touchdown San Francisco.
Young stumbles on the way back and fires up the middle. Pass is caught by Owens.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm your host, Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis, plus timely and entertaining sports and pop culture topics. And today, we're going to be talking about the latest on the Brandon Aiyuk contract stalemate, what Purdy had to say about Aiyuk, and how the contract of Eagles receiver Devonta Smith could help move things along, even though I don't think anything's going to get done until the summer. The Niners did not stand pat. They re-signed a receiver with some punt return ability. I'll be discussing that. The deep dive into the draft continues. We're going to be looking at linebackers, cornerbacks, and safeties. Who's on the roster, opportunities to improve through the draft, and some potential draft picks in rounds 1 through 7. In the plus section, we're going to be talking about the WNBA draft and WNBA salaries, which has gotten a lot of attention since the draft a few days ago. I want to dive into the whys of that. Aaron Rodgers in the news again for just being a complete moronic blowhard. We're going to get into that. And streaming TV services introducing channels. I have some thoughts there as Disney Plus will be going that route. But like always, it starts with the Niners, so let's get right into it.
Let's talk Niners.
So the Brandon Aiyuk saga continues, and obviously it's not going to go away. There's going to be media chatter. There's probably going to be more juvenile behavior before he either signs a long-term contract, which I believe he will, or gets traded, which I believe he won't. But the latest being Aiyuk unfollowing the 49ers on Instagram. Absolutely broke my heart. I couldn't sleep. I could not sleep. Who is it? I don't think anyone's advising him at this point. I know it's taking a page out of the Deebo Samuel and other players' playbooks in terms of trying to get a contract extension, but no one's telling these kids, and I know they're in their 20s, they're grown men, but they're acting like kids. No one's telling these children that this shit doesn't matter. Talking about ramping up the urgency for the 49ers to sign him. Does anyone think, and I know the answer is no, but going through Deebo, Brandon Aiyuk's head when they're doing an unfollow of a certain social media platform, do you think John Lynch notices this and goes to Kyle or Parag Marath like, oh shit, Aiyuk just unfollowed us on Instagram. He means business. Let's get the checkbook before he goes on Yelp and posts a negative review about us there. Is this really what it's coming to? And these are fans. These are pseudo media members that are digging this up. They're going on Brandon Aiyuk's social accounts, searching for 49ers. And if nothing comes up, that means he's unfollowed. A certain player, in this case Aiyuk, has unfollowed the team. So what? There's precedent for when players are going to get signed. For the 49ers, it's going to be the summer. Lynch, Shanahan, etc. Just don't let it be a week before the season starts or too late in training camp where you risk injury or rust or not putting your best foot forward with one of your best players, offensively or otherwise, to hit the ground running when the season starts. Now, Brock Purdy recently had a passing camp. I don't know if it was in Santa Clara or at Levi Stadium or someone nearby, but he was asked about the Brandon Aiyuk situation and had a very adult and diplomatic quote. Here it is. Quote, I just told him I'll always have his back and support him in whatever he does. I want the best for him. It's a business thing, so for me to say anything about that, that's out of my pay grade. Not for long. He and I talk through things and I hear him out. At the end of the day, what he's done for me, giving me an opportunity to come in and throw him the ball, I'll always be thankful for that. What else is Brock going to say? But for someone in their early 20s, he has a maturity and a poise. He understands. He has a good head on his shoulders. He understands where things are, and obviously you're not going to get involved in another person's affair when it comes to financial stuff. But Aiyuk is being impatient. And Lynch was asked about a month ago, I can promise you there's nothing going on the trade front, meaning they're not reaching out. They're not looking for trade suitors. I don't even know if Aiyuk's agent needs to request permission from the 49ers for that. But there was a breaking news story on Twitter. Twitter sports, journalists, always reputable, always solid, saying that Brandon Aiyuk had formally requested a trade from the 49ers. Day later, his agent comes out and denies that. Now, if you're the agent, if you're Aiyuk and you want to drum up urgency, they keep using the word, and holding the Niners' feet to the fire, why would you deny that he requested a trade? You can't say Aiyuk's going about this completely the right way because there are these stupid social media things. There's family members, fiancés posting stuff. Like everybody, Herm Edwards always said something to the effect of, you can write whatever you want and you can be angry or displeased on social media. You can write whatever you want down, just don't hit send. Write yourself a letter, put it in a drawer, do a Word document, save it as a draft. You don't need to hit send, right? Just because everybody or your followers have access to any time you want to post a thought doesn't mean everything has to be for social consumption or public consumption. And Aiyuk's being impatient. I've said in previous podcasts why. Because when he signs and gets guaranteed money or a signing bonus, he gets that $20+ million that day. And I would want $20+ million that day today instead of waiting until June or July or August for it. Hell, the way interest rates are on, with online banks, I'd be losing out on, 5% interest for those 3, 4, 5 months. What the hell? Every $100 or $1,000 at that point may not matter, but would matter to me because I'm a cheap bastard. But he is impatient. Look at T. Higgins. T. Higgins has been franchised by the Bengals. When that happened, Higgins requested a trade. But a few days ago, when he was asked, I forget where he was, but asked about it, he said he anticipates playing for Cincinnati this season. Quote, "I do anticipate it. I've grown a love for Cincinnati that I didn't think I would. I'm looking forward to it." Has Aiyuk come out and said anything like that? Has there been anything? Now, he was in, and I haven't watched it yet, but if you guys have seen it, he was in an undercover working at an Applebee's. I don't know if it was a commercial or just like a viral video type thing, which I heard he acquitted himself well and it was funny and nice to know that he's not, if nothing else, right? It's nice to know that he's not sulking and just being a downer and not wanting to be involved in anything or with anybody while the contract, it's not even necessarily on hold. He's going to get paid $14.1 million this year if he plays. And Lynch was asked, do you anticipate Aiyuk playing on his 5th-year option? And he said, I don't know. That's something you'll have to ask him about. And again, you can't speak for the player. Now, T. Higgins playing on the franchise tag, which, a lot of players or all players don't want to do because there's no long-term security or extra financial security. Long-term doesn't matter, really the way contracts are built. There's money that's built into the back end that increases the average annual value that player will never see, but it's for the agent's cut and releasing stuff to the media to say that you're the highest paid player at your position per year, blah, 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 bullshit. But there is a significant difference in the franchise tag, which is for receivers, $21.9 million that Higgins would play on versus the $14.1 that Aiyuk would play on. Still a lot of money, right? For us that are blue collar, white collar jobs, not professional entertainers or athletes or actors or anything like that. But it is a $7.7 million difference. That's a lot. So I understand where Aiyuk's coming from. There's always a way that you can handle it. Things are always going on behind the scenes. I'm not sure that they're talking about this daily or Aiyuk or his agent are talking to the Niners daily, but everybody knows where this stands. And again, I just don't see him going anywhere because one, and I keep seeing people on social media, you could trade Aiyuk and there's some really good receivers. If you get 80% of his production, wouldn't you want to do that and save the money? Guys, you realize 80% in the last 2 years was 1,100 yards and 1,300 yards. You're telling me a first or second year receiver is going to go between 850 and maybe 1,100 yards when Kyle is hesitant to play rookies, no matter how promising a rookie may be? Hell, Debo didn't do that his first 2 years. And granted, I know he gets the ball hands off as well, but he didn't crack that his first 2 years, receiving wise. So this myth of you can just get a receiver to step in, you can't, because the transition to the NFL game, that's going to make Debo your number one. He's not a number one. This rookie would have to come in and play. It's so rare. Randy Moss, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, I'm sure there are others that have had gangbuster. We're talking about a Pro Bowl level season in your first year, your rookie year. Doesn't happen. And to think that someone's going to come in and be as polished and nuanced of a route runner and have the rapport that he has with Purdy, and that's a big thing to come back to. Lynch wants to and Kyle want to pair Purdy with someone that he can grow with. And that's more Aiyuk than Debo. That's one of the reasons why I don't think anything's going to happen with Aiyuk. And I think all of us can breathe a sigh of relief once day one of the draft is gone. Because if Aiyuk is not traded by then, he's not going to get traded because San Francisco would want a pick in this year's draft, not even one, probably more than one pick or a pick and a player or whatever, to offset the loss of Aiyuk and try to get immediate help in at receiver for a team that's looking to make a Super Bowl push in which the window might be it's not going to close, but the opening of the window is going to get smaller as the next couple years go by as they figure out how to work their roster around Brock Purdy's salary. But some good news, if you want to call it that. Recently, earlier this week, wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles, Devonta Smith, agreed to a contract extension. 3 years, $75 million, 51 guaranteed, $20.1 million guaranteed at signing. Now, I see online how people are comparing Aiyuk's last 3 years with Devonta Smith's last 3 years, and you keep saying, Aiyuk's doing more with less. Same yards or more yards on less targets and less catches, fewer, just about the same number of touchdowns, and that he should get paid so much more, etc. Now, I'm going to take my 49er fandom hat off and say, I'm not going to come out and say Brandon Aiyuk is a significantly better receiver than Devonta Smith. I mean, Smith is a smaller receiver. He can blow the top off, probably a little bit, bit more agile. Good compliment to A.J. Brown in Philadelphia. Maybe A.J. Brown is more the comp. I mean, A.J. Brown could be the comp. A.J. Brown is Debo and Aiyuk rolled into one. Big, strong, can run over people, good hands, good route runner, and good speed. Devonta Smith, that's more of like a Jalen Waddle, kind of comparison to me, even though Devonta Smith has had better seasons than Jalen Waddle. But to me, if you want to draw the comparison between these two players, Devonta Smith has only been in the league for 3 years. Last year was Aiyuk's 4th year. So obviously there is that growth from year 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and 3 to 4. And he has increased his yardage in every year, going over 1,000 yards year 3, 1,100, and then going over 1,300 yards in year 4. But to me, so Devonta Smith doesn't have the benefit of that 4th year. That's going to be this year. And outside of injury or Jalen Hurts completely shitting the bed, there's going to be another step forward for Devonta Smith. So I want to compare, because I think it's more fair, comparing Devonta Smith's only 3 years in the league, which are also known as his first 3 years, with Brandon Aiyuk's first 3 years in the league. So let's go through it. Let's go through Aiyuk first. 294 targets, 194 receptions, 2,589 yards, 13.3 yards per reception, 18 touchdowns. Okay. Devonta Smith's first only 3 years in the league, 352 targets, 240 receptions, 3,178 receiving yards, 13.2 yards per reception, and 19 touchdowns. So let me just give you the comparisons. 58 more targets for Devonta Smith, 46 more receptions, about 600 more yards. Yards per reception is basically even, 13.3 for Aiyuk, 13.2 for Smith. Touchdowns basically even, 18 for Aiyuk, 19 for Smith. There's the comp. So if Devonta Smith is, and you can't take away Ayuk's fourth year and the growth, etc., but comparable players, their first 3 years in league, and you can argue Devonta Smith was more productive with targets and receptions. Granted, Philadelphia, if you want to say Philadelphia throws the ball more than San Francisco, they do, but they are one of the leading rushing teams between running backs and Jalen Hurts. So you're taking opportunities away from your receivers, maybe not as much as you are in San Francisco, but I think it's the whole overblown where, it's because San Francisco doesn't throw the ball that much. And yes, they don't, but it's not like Philadelphia's a run and shoot team, guys. One of the best lines in the league. They like to run the ball with multiple pieces. And they obviously can be explosive in the passing game. So 3 years, $75 million, $51 guaranteed for Devonta Smith. Here's what A.J. Brown's contract looks like for the Eagles. In 2022, he signed a 4-year deal, or may have been end of 2021. 4 years, $100 million, $57 million guaranteed, $40 million guaranteed at signing. And that's that comparable that Debo got because they signed along with DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin in the same offseason. Now, both Eagle receivers are free agents after 2026, so they have them both for another 3 years. This proves that teams can have two high-priced receivers and a high-priced quarterback, sorta, because every team's cap structure in terms of if they're front-loading contracts, back-loading contracts, what they're spending on positionally is different. The Eagles, even after the Devonta Smith extension, plus they've extended other key pieces, I think on their O-line, and maybe another position or two as well. The Eagles still have $29 million in cap space this year. Niners have about $6.5 million. They'll get another $18 million in a month and a half once Eric Armstead's contract comes off the books. The way the Eagles are structured, though, their largest cap hit this year is offensive lineman Lane Johnson. It's only $15.8 million. San Francisco's cap hits, they have 3 players that are more than Lane Johnson cap hit-wise. Trent Williams, $31.6 million. Debo, $28.6 million. Charvarius Ward, $18.4 million. Things creep up for the Eagles in 2025, where A.J. Brown's cap hit is $26.5, Jalen Hurts, $21.7, and Lane Johnson's has a modest jump to $17.4. Roster construction, positional spending, releasing players, redoing deals. The salary cap is real. But the Eagles are showing, and granted, they have things structured differently, and at least for this year, it's okay. Just like the Niners, when they extend Brandon Aiyuk, they will gain some cap relief because they can save as much as $10 million on Ayuk's 2024 cap. Now, they may say, the heck with it, keep it. Let's have more savings in later years. Mathematically, it might not matter. You save the 10 years in 2024 this season. Whatever savings you have in 2024 just rolls over into 2025 and so on, which the 49ers and other teams have rolled over from 2023 to now. So I think Devonta Smith is a good comp. I don't think if Aiyuk is asking for Tyreek Hill money, Devontae Adams money, whatever Justin Jefferson gets, T. Higgins is going to be off the market, or he is off the market, but he's going to play under the franchise tag. If I said Jamar Chase, I don't recall. One, when you look at, like I said, average annual values, Tyreek Hill at 30, Debo at about 23, 24, A.J. Brown at 25, that is always increased by phony bullshit money the last year of the deal that the player will never see. So A.J. Brown's deal is probably closer to $22 million a year than the 25 when you just do the math. Tyreek Hill's the same. Justin Jefferson is going to blow it out of the water. He's going to get close to 30, probably legit dollars per year. Chase, Jalen Waddle's going to be up for an extension. He's going to probably get Devonta Smith money or less. He's got to just prove that he can stay healthy. But I think this was favorable that the Devonta Smith contract came out now. And everyone's saying, well, sign Aiyuk now because the price is going to go up when Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase sign. Why? They're better, more productive number one receivers than Aiyuk is. Aiyuk's still a number one receiver, but is anyone going to confuse him with Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase? No. Or Tyreek Hill? No. Or Devontae Adams, even though he's a little bit older? No. And that's okay. Just because you're next doesn't mean you have to reset the market. You can reset the market when you have a legit reason to. When Tyreek Hill did, after being traded from the Chiefs to the Dolphins, that was legit. And he has wildly produced since then. Haven't won a playoff game, and the Chiefs have two Super Bowl rings since. And if you want to say he's worth his money, I guess so, based on his numbers and productivity alone. Is he elevating that team to something more? They got him into the playoffs the past 2 years, but haven't gotten past the wild card round. So is it really worth it? Do you want to be a super expensive one and done team? I don't know. Conversation for another day. So moving on from the Aiyuk contract stuff, the Niners did sign a receiver, actually brought back wide receiver Trent Taylor, who the 49ers drafted in 2017. His rookie year coming out of Louisiana State was his best year in the pros, 43 receptions, 430 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Stayed with San Francisco through his 2020 season, although he missed 2019 due to injury, was in Cincinnati 2021, and 2022 was in Chicago last year. Slot receiver, but Shanahan obviously right now prefers the big slot, with Juwan Jennings getting that 1 year, $4.9 million second round tender. Taylor's not explosive, but a reliable punt returner, or at the very least, much more reliable than Ronnie Bell. You want to talk about punt return liability? Let's go back 12 years. Kyle Williams in the NFC Championship game against San Francisco. And what happened in the Super Bowl, even though it wasn't Ray McLeod's fault, the ball hitting off of Darrell Luter, maybe someone like a Trent Taylor just falls on the ball and doesn't try to pick it up while running. This is just theoretical or hypothetical. Kyle has trust issues. We know that with younger players. So, even if a receiver is drafted to come in that has returnability, there's no guarantee if Trent Taylor makes the roster that young, more explosive player will get punt return duties. Kick returns at this point don't even matter. I don't know what we're looking at with the new kick return alignment. Debo, would McCaffrey be back there? Would Jordan? I don't know. I'm not worried about that, but it is punt returns. But if he can average, with San Francisco, he averaged 9.6 yards per punt return. And his last 3 years in Cincinnati and Chicago, he averaged 9.2. If he can get close to a first down, 10 yards, every punt return, I know that's on average. Some returns, there'll be a fair catch. Some returns will be 5 yards, 15 yards, whatever. It's fine. Not looking, game breaking would be great, but at this point, we've seen the special teams issues on kick returns, on punt returns, on coverage, kick coverage. If they can have a very high floor, which Trent Taylor does as a punt returner, I think that would ease Kyle Shanahan's nerves and I think make us feel a little bit better with someone that's more reliable, especially with well, if no more swirling winds, it's not Candlestick Park, it's Santa Clara. But just someone with a little bit more experience and a little bit more reliability. Now, this isn't going to prevent San Francisco from drafting a wide receiver or anybody. Could be a cornerback, a running back, someone with returnability. It's not that, oh, Trent Taylor's here, we have it solved. There's no guarantee he makes the 53. I don't know what the structure of the contract looks like. I don't know what his vet minimum was going to be, if he even got vet minimum, like around $1.5 million, let's just say. And I don't know if most of that is, say, $1 million or $1.25 million is guaranteed, how much that would play into him staying. But there's no guarantee he makes the roster. You know, Danny Gray, certainly a bubble player. Chris Conley showed some, again, veteran dependability. It was more Chris Conley in the playoffs and Super Bowl than Ronnie Bell. And obviously Danny Gray was on IR, tried to come off IR for the year, but they just stashed him. And I do think they're going to bring someone else in via the draft. But let's move from offense and receivers to draft preview. We're going to be talking linebackers and the secondary. We're going to go through the 49ers linebackers on the roster who might get cut if they bring in another linebacker either through the draft or later on in free agency. But linebackers, guys, are going to be keeping 5 or 6 at the absolute most. I think they had 7 last year because Randy Gregory was officially considered an outside linebacker on the 49ers website, but obviously played defensive end on the line of scrimmage. Keeping 5 or 6. We're going to get to Greenlaw last, but on the roster now, Fred Warner, Devondre Campbell, Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles, second-year players D. Winters, Jalen Graham, Curtis Robinson, and they brought in Ezekiel Turner from the Cardinals, and Dre Greenlaw, who will start out on the PUP list, who will probably not be back until sometime in mid to late October is my guess. So if you don't count Greenlaw, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 linebackers on the roster. I do think they'll bring in someone via draft or certainly an undrafted free agent or two just to add some, competition. But again, Devondre Campbell brought in veteran. Whatever they've seen from D. Winters or Jalen Graham so far, they want to go more of an experienced route. Hell, even Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles. And if you're wondering, like, oh, well, maybe if D. Winters or Graham or a rookie outplays them, they can get rid of some of these more veteran players. Well, if they cut Devondre Campbell, and they're not going to, but of his contract, it's a little over $2 million. $1.9 million is dead money they're on the hook for. They'd only save about $300,000. Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles, $1.95 million of his salary is going to hit the cap. They're on the hook for if they release him, and I don't think there's any savings there. So I think those two players are locked in. Now, granted, 1.9 million-ish for each doesn't sound like a ton, but when you're up against the cap, remember, if you're going to cut them and be on the hook for 1.9 million, what about the player you're bringing in, the draft pick, which might be a million or 900,000? So you have that player gone at 1.9 million, plus the player that's going to take his place with a cap hit of 1 million. So that player technically costs you 2.9 million, right? It would have to be someone that completely blows the Niners away. And there might be an opportunity here for a 6th linebacker. But remember, Greenlaw is probably going to come back. You could always pull up a Curtis Robinson or Ezekiel Turner from the practice squad should they not make the 53. But let's go through cuts and saving money. Second-year players, Winters and Graham. If Winters gets cut, they save $33,000. Woohoo. I'm sorry, they're on the hook for $33,000 and they save $915,000. Graham's even less. They'd only be on the hook for $19,000, save $915,000 again. Possible cuts should someone come in that blows them away. Curtis Robinson was on the practice squad last year. If they cut him, 0 dead money, save $1 million. Ezekiel Turner brought in from the Cardinals. They cut him, 0 dead money, $1.15 million saved. So Warner, Campbell, and Flannigan-Fowles, based on their, Warner, based on their experience and salaries, and of course Warner's not going anywhere, are locks. So you have 2 or 3 spots open with minimal to no dead cap hits if anybody has to be released. And of course, keeping an eye on the whole Dre Greenlaw situation, not wanting to rush him back, which is why I'm saying maybe October-ish is a realistic time frame. So I don't see the Niners taking a linebacker early. There's absolutely not a need to take a linebacker early. So players that they could target in the 4th through 7th round, to me, ideally, maybe the 5th through 7th rounds. Jalen Ford out of Texas, Curtis Jacobs out of Penn State, Tyrese Knight from UTEP, and Omar Spates from LSU. I'm not going to go into the benefits of each one, size, weight, etc. This is such to me like a low priority. If they didn't draft 2 linebackers last year, then I'd say, all right, they got to start looking at, and even a succession plan, because I think Dre Greenlaw's gone after this year. Because again, guys, you can't pay everybody. But that's why if you have Winters and Graham and maybe another rookie comes in and you keep 6 linebackers, one of those 3 could be the heir apparent to Dre Greenlaw, but it's not preventing them next year from going out and getting, again, someone like a Devondre Campbell, maybe a 26, 27, 28-year-old linebacker to pair with that has a little bit more experience, which the coaching staff's going to trust, or just seems like that they're going to trust more than younger players, to pair up with Fred Warner. But let's move from the draft. So just four names, maybe starting end of round 4, 5, 6, 7 to maybe keep an eye on. Secondary. So let's start with safeties. For a decent part of last year, the Niners went with 3 safeties. I think the fact that Talanoa Hufanga is coming off of an ACL, and if recovery goes well, he very well might be ready for week 1. In fact, I think the chances are better than average that he's going to be ready for week 1. But because of coming off of an ACL, I don't see them going with 3 safeties. I think they're going to go with 4. I wouldn't roll with 3 safeties and call up someone on the practice squad a couple times. I think you do that in an emergency, not to set your initial 53 in September. But on the roster, Jair Brown, Talanoa Hufanga, and George Odom are the 3 locks. Taylor Hawkins, Eric Harris, the veteran, round out your 5 safeties. Now, they looked at Justin Blackman from the Colts. He got about $7 million on a 1-year deal to come back. The Niners were not going that high. If they can find a veteran at a modest price, and I'm not sure what modest is when they're probably going to be around $5 million under the cap after Trent Taylor's contract hits the books. The draft, I think, is going to be a place that they're going to look to add a safety, because I think Talanoa Hufanga is another player that the Niners may need to let walk to get right from a salary cap perspective. And it feels like 2 big hits when I talk about Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga. It's not like they are the only star players, in their position groups. Fred Warner is the best linebacker in football. Yes, Dre Greenlaw is a good complement and a very good linebacker himself, but it's not like it was only Dre Greenlaw and nobody else. Talanoa Hufanga, although he was an all-pro, Pro Bowler, still, I think, takes bad angles, not super athletic, decent blitzer, but I don't think he would be a huge loss. And if Jair Brown can build off of what he did his rookie year, having an interception in the Super Bowl, 1 or 2 during the regular season, I think they can bring someone in, maybe, a veteran and a rookie to patch that stuff together. They extended George Odom a month or so ago. He's extended through 2026. Special teams player. I'm leery of him being on the field in a starter's capacity. I don't know why they extended him. I don't know if it was to free up cap space this year. He's signed now through 2026, although they could get out of it next year with not a tremendous hit. And Taylor Hawkins is a young 2nd or 3rd year player, had an interception week 18, that home loss against the Rams. It didn't mean anything. Wound up, I think, breaking his hand. So if Hawkins gets cut, they're on the hook for nothing. They save $795,000. Eric Harris, same thing. They're on the hook for no money, saved $985,000. But looking at the draft, it's not a great draft at the top, meaning round 1 for safeties, where the Niners are drafting. Again, I'm assuming no trade-ups here, guys. Picking at number 31 in the first round, maybe a Tyler Nubin from Minnesota, might be the only safety overall that could get first round consideration. Now, once you get into the mid rounds, and we're going to call that 2 through 4, here's where I think the Niners can find someone that provides, I don't want to say, not an instant starter this year, because it's going to be Hufanga if he is healthy, and I'm hoping he is, but good backup, could step into a starting role midway through the season if any sort of injury happens like Jair Brown did, and could be groomed to be a starter in 2025. And those safeties are Javon Bullard from Georgia, Kalen Bullock, a big safety, 6'2", out of USC, Cole Bishop, safety out of Utah, another big safety, 6'2", Cameron Kinchins from the University of Miami, Florida, and Jaden Hicks from Washington State could be mid-round names, again, assuming no trade-ups, that the Niners could bring in. They're not going to sign a veteran safety, I don't think, before the draft. And signing a safety in rounds, 2 through 4, more or less guarantees that a veteran would not make the roster, but they could bring a veteran safety in, like a local, if they were to keep Eric Harris on the practice squad like they did last year, they can do something like that. But with their picks, I know they have 10, and I've been on record saying they're probably going to make 7 or 8 picks, players that would realistically make this roster. Those are players to look for in rounds 2 through 4. When we get later, 5 through 7, another Georgia safety, Tyke Smith, a little bit smaller than Javon Bullard, Kenny Logan Jr. from Kansas, more of an in-the-box kind of tackling safety versus coverage. Josh Proctor from Ohio State, who the 49ers had in, I believe, on a visit or a discussion at the Combine. And Keaton Oladapo from Oregon State could be some late-round possibilities. Jair Brown under contract for 3 more years. George Odom under contract for 3 more years. Hufanga, this is his last year. And again, the money situation might be very tough to re-sign, but could net them, maybe a 3rd or 4th round pick, compensatory pick, should he walk in the same with Dre Greenlaw, given the contracts that they will probably fetch in free agency. So now cornerbacks, and the Niners have supplemented this quite a bit in free agency. Let's go right through the list. Then we're going to talk about dollars and cuts. Charvarius Ward, Diamador Lenore, Ambry Thomas, just brought in Isaac Yadam, more recently brought in Rock Ya-Sin, Samuel Womack, Darrell Luter Jr., Chase Lucas brought in, and Keemon Hall. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Did I count that right? Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes. I had to count with my fingers on the screen. 9 cornerbacks on the roster. Not sure how many you feel good about, but the depth feels better to me. Bringing in an Isaac Yadam, bringing in a Rock Ya-Sin who could play outside or inside, versus what they had last year. I would really believe that Ambry Thomas is on his way out. Again, I never wish ill will on anybody, but I do want him gone. And if he gets cut, all these cuts I'm saying are after June 1st, so, OTAs, training camp, final cuts, etc. The Niners would only be on the hook for $210,000. They would save $1.2 million. For shits and giggles, let's talk about Isaac Yadam. I think he's going to make the team. I think if the Niners don't draft a cornerback with maybe the top 2 rounds, their first 2 picks, he has a very good chance of starting. If for some reason he gets cut, Niners would only owe $275,000. They would save $1.6 million on the cap. Rock Ya-Sin is interesting because he was signed later on after Isaac Yadam. I mean, not much more later. We're talking about a couple weeks. Played last couple seasons or maybe just last year in Baltimore with the Raiders before that. If he gets released, $1 million in dead money would hit the cap. That's much higher than I thought would be for someone who signed at this point in free agency. They'd only save $96,000. Fine. So now let's move on to some of the younger players. Samuel Womack in his 3rd year showed promise his rookie year as being the slot corner. Team went away from that. If he is released, only on the hook for $70,000, would save $985,000. Darrell Luter, 5th round draft pick. They like his, size, length, physicality, can be a press corner, speed. If he gets released and they're, 5th round pick last year doesn't guarantee him anything, $78,000 cap hit would save $915,000. And then the last two, Chase Lucas, who they brought in, smaller corner, could be for special teams, kick coverage unit, could be a backup slot, would not be on the hook for any money, would save $985,000, and the same for Keemon Hall. So the Niners need to do some work at the cornerback spot, even though, again, they have numbers. If Ambry Thomas is gone, you're down to 8. If Lucas and Keemon Hall don't make the team and are on the practice squad, you have 6, which is the absolute most that you would keep. This is before the draft. But the first 5 cornerbacks I mentioned, Ward, Lenore, Thomas, again, I think is gone. Isaac Yiadom and Rock Ya-Sin are only under contract through this year. I have seen some discussion about a Deommodore Lenore extension. Whether his best fit is in the slot or outside, I know there's a lot of discussion about that. We'll see. It really depends on the players around him. He is more of a slot corner than an Isaac Yiadom is, or a Darrell Luter. Rock Ya-Sin can play inside, outside. Womack could potentially also. And Ambry Thomas was only an outside cornerback and not a very good one at that. So I think they should bring somebody in. I think they should draft someone in the top half of the draft. I think Ward's going to be too if they re-sign Lenore, they're not going to re-sign Ward. Ward's going to be too expensive. Maybe they could re-sign Yiadom or Rock Ya-Sin on a modest contract. If they make the team and show out well this year, you would still have Womack and Luter under contract. You're going to need to field, obviously, a secondary in 2025, but you don't have to solve it now, right? You just have to solve 2024's cornerback room now. But doesn't hurt to look ahead. So let's, talk about in the first round, should 3 players fall to them, the Niners could look at them as first round picks. Now, would they be guaranteed as starters? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. That's why there's going to be OTAs and training camp battles. But the 3 players being Cooper DeJean out of Iowa, 6 foot tall, outside corner, Kool-Aid McKinstry from Alabama, 5'11", has the makeup, the ability to be a number 1 corner, as does DeJean, and Nate Wiggins out of Clemson could be first round targets should they slip to 31. Again, not playing the trade up game. Now, rounds 2 to 4, where you could obviously still find a starter or a very good backup that could develop into a starter if this is a depth piece and a look ahead year. You could look at TJ Tampa from Iowa State, 6'1", Kalen Carson out of Wake Forest, 6 foot tall corner, DJ James, 6 foot tall, little lean, about under 180 pounds. Could play inside, outside. I think Tampa and Carson are outside corners. Renardo Green from Florida State has slot and outside flexibility. Cam Hart, 6'2" corner from Notre Dame, not super fast, but technically sound. And Andrew Phillips, a 5'11" corner, outside, inside slot flexibility as well from Kentucky. So there are some mid-round players to continue. When we get to rounds 5 through 7, we're going to start out with a couple players that the Niners, or at least one player the Niners have been linked to or talked about. Chow Smith-Wade from Washington State. Nehemiah Pritchett has the measurables. San Francisco looks for 6'1", but fast. Johnny Dixon from Penn State. Pritchett was out of Auburn. If I didn't say it, I apologize. Kamal Hayden out of Tennessee. And DeCamerion Richardson, who the Niners, I believe, had a top 30 visit with. Again, a tall, rangy, fast corner from Mississippi State. I think the players that we went, the positions that we went over, I think certainly safety and cornerback, the Niners will draft. Linebacker, I could see them drafting a linebacker late. Doesn't seem to be as much as people are saying, Greenlaw's hurt and They need someone in case Greenlaw's gone. They have players on the roster. They have young players, Winters and Graham, that they can develop. And they don't have to solve it this year. They have numbers and some good depth and veteran players in Campbell and Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles that if you release them, you're going to be on the hook for close to $2 million each. But corner, safety, can definitely see them addressing that relatively early or mid-rounds of the draft. Linebacker, I would see maybe the 5th, 6th, or 7th round, if at all. So that concludes the 49ers section of the podcast. Stick around. We're going to be talking WNBA draft, WNBA salaries, Aaron Rodgers saying more stupid things, and streaming TV platforms that have channels. Stay with us.
It's plus time.
So my older son and I watched the vast majority of the WNBA draft earlier this week. Obviously a foregone conclusion that Caitlin Clark was going to go number 1 overall to the Indiana Fever. Well, a lot of cool moments. Awesome, just any sort of draft. NFL, NBA, WNBA. Don't really watch, baseball or hockey. But, seeing the emotion, the dreams coming true for these young athletes is just, always cool. And now I don't know a lot about the WNBA or, good fits for certain players, team fits. But it was good. It was a good broadcast. Really, cool and fun to watch. I think one of the coolest moments was, and I'm forgetting her name, I apologize, but one of Caitlin Clark's teammates who was there to support her wound up getting drafted in whether it was the 2nd or 3rd round, and she was not expected to get drafted at all, and they had to call her down from the balcony. That was a really cool moment. Now, not a guarantee that she's going to make, the team, and I don't recall what team she was drafted by, but that was just a very cool, there's a difference between, you're going to be drafted number 1, top 5, top 10. You're going. It's just a matter of where you're going, and you're going to stick on that team, to someone who really maybe had no thoughts, or I don't want to say hopes, that might be the wrong word, but really was okay with probably not being drafted and maybe playing overseas, and gets drafted and gets her opportunity. Super, super cool. And all the best for all those young ladies in terms of, growing their careers and making an impact in the WNBA, which I definitely believe that they will. What's come under fire, and rightfully so, is Caitlin Clark, as the number 1 pick, signed a 4-year, $338,000 contract that averages $84,500 per year. So obviously, when you're hearing about contracts and number 1 picks and can't compare it to the NBA or NFL, in any universe, that's low for a professional athlete. And we're going to get into highest paid WNBA players. We're not talking about she's the highest paid player. She's the highest paid rookie. And rookies don't make as much as they used to, certainly in the NFL and the NBA, the way that they've adjusted the CBA and slotting salaries with picks, etc. But the difference between Caitlin Clark, the WNBA number 1 pick, and Victor Wembanyama, the number 1 pick in the NBA of the San Antonio Spurs this past season, he received a 4-year, $55 million deal, with a $13.8 million a year average. Obviously, quite the difference. We're going to get into a lot of the whys. And I don't think anyone on here that's listening is anyone that's the loud, I don't know if it's a minority or majority of voicing their displeasure of how much or how little WNBA players get paid. There are reasons for that, and the organization and people watching can do better. But let's just put all kind of the facts out there. So in addition to salaries, WNBA players receive a free 2-bedroom apartment to live in and a car. Now, in the research I've done, I don't know if that's just during the season or as long as they're employed in the WNBA. And maybe I'm sure the apartment would probably move if they, via free agency, they move cities. So living expenses, rent taken care of, and travel or transportation in a way, a car is taken care of as well. Okay, that does not make up for the salary difference at all, but for folks that are just, hung on salary, there's more to it than that. Not a ton more, but there's more, right? And there's a lot to unpack here with this pay difference between the WNBA and the NBA. And I think what we can agree on is while WNBA salaries are low for being a professional athlete, overall, I think it's fair to say sports salaries are way too high. The amount that players get to play a game, way too high. But in the leagues that are the top paying leagues, the NBA, Major League Baseball, NFL, if you want to talk about European soccer, throw, NASCAR in there, tennis to a certain degree. Salaries way too high, but it is commensurate mostly to the amount of revenue those teams, those arenas, those sports, those TV rights bring in for each respective sport. And that, in a nutshell, and we're going to go into it more, is why WNBA salaries, even though they're in their, 27th season, are still so low. Now, I talked about higher paid WNBA players, and the highest paid player is Jackie Young of the Las Vegas Aces, making $252,000 a year. There are 20 players in the league who make $200,000 or more, including Diana Taurasi, Skylar Diggins-Smith, Sabrina Ionescu, and Breanna Stewart, some of the more well-known players. In the grand scheme of things, $250,000, $200,000 a lot for an athlete. When you look, because we're inundated, right? NFL free agency just happened. We're going to get into the draft and how much these players are going to be making. Major League Baseball hot stove free agency was for the past couple months, and you're going to be seeing players signing, 7-8 figure deals with ease as we, continue the season. Any free agency trades, whatever it may be. Here are the numbers on the WNBA that people need to be aware of. And whether you care or not, these are just the numbers and the facts. The salary cap for each team, $1.42 million per team. NFL's is about $240 million. Baseball doesn't have a cap. There's a luxury tax. The NBA has a soft cap. NHL has a cap, and I should know what that is, but it's obviously it's not $1.42 million. Roster size per team is only 11 or 12 players and only 12 teams in the league. So when you only have 12 teams and each team only plays 40 games, which is 42 fewer games than the NBA, and your average attendance per game is 5,700 people, and your average viewership on TV is 412,000 people, those last two things, it's participation, it's being engaged, involved, watching, going, that needs to get better. And that's not something that a WNBA franchise or players can really force. Yes, there's marketing departments. They could have bobblehead night and shirt giveaways and discount tickets, whatever it may be. But when you're packing less than half the arena, significantly less than half the arena in some instances, and you're only playing half the games, that's compounding factors that are bringing profits and revenue away from the league and the players because you're not putting it in. There's not enough butts in the seats. There's not enough. 40 games is probably enough, but there's not as many games as the NBA. That the games, don't misunderstand, does not account for the salary difference. It does not. But if you played 50 games, 55 games, 60 games, more revenue. If you had more than 12 teams, 16, 18, 20, more revenue, right? On average. I mean, there might be some teams that could be operating at a loss if they choose a really bad city that has a terrible fan base and no one's going and they have bad players. Like, just because you have a team doesn't mean you're going to make money, right? But more than 12 teams, more than 40 games, people attending more, people watching more would all increase the revenue pie and have a direct impact on players' salaries. Now, we're not talking that, a player would go from $252,000 a year to $25 million a year. But for, a WNBA player, if you could double her salary, I mean, again, it's only $500,000. Christ, I would like to make $500,000. I know I'm not a professional athlete though. But the standard of living, when you double someone's salary, even if someone's making $40,000 and they're going to $80,000, that's meaningful to them, meaningful for their lives. It might not be this type of generational wealth and money that the big four male American sports teams and players make, but still meaningful. Now, in terms of revenue, based on the research that I've done, the numbers vary. So anybody can go to a site and say, oh, the revenue's only $60 million this year, or 80, or 120, or 180, or 200. I'm going to go with $180 million in anticipated revenue this year. The biggest problem with the WNBA, or the biggest issue that they need to clear in terms of upping the salaries, and you could make a target in your mind if you want the highest paid players being paid $1 million. Shoot for the stars. We just know it needs to go up. The revenue split in the WNBA, from what I've found, is 80%, 20%, owners at 80, players at 20. NFL, MLB, NBA, you have close to a 50-50 split of revenue. And granted, the revenue in football, you're talking in the billions. Same with baseball, same with NBA. You're talking billions. You're not talking $180 million. But if that $180 million hypothetically was split 50-50, that means the salary cap for each team in the WNBA would go from $1.42 million to $7.5 million. Again, let's not compare it to men's sports, folks. You can't. I don't think you'll ever be able to. And I'm not saying that. I'm not being a chauvinist or anything. I just don't. The NBA has been around a lot longer than WNBA. Football is the most popular sport in the country. Basketball super popular. Baseball may be coming in third, but still a lot of, 30 or 32 teams, a lot of eyeballs, becoming international. You can't jump from a $252,000 salary from your highest paid player to $2, $3, $4, $5 million overnight. It doesn't have to be incremental steps either. And I think Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and others coming into the league is going to put more butts in the seats and more eyeballs on TVs, streaming devices, wherever you're watching. Money is coming. The influx of money, sponsorship deals, right? Either with the league, with teams, with players, going to increase. I just hope this is not an anomaly, because when you're talking about Caitlin Clark, you are talking about a generational talent, beyond the generational talent. The all-time leading scorer in college basketball history, men's or women's, and she still had another year of eligibility. Owners need to share more with players. We don't know the books. We don't know how they're cooking their books or not. But for many, many years, I don't know if it was close to 2 decades, the NBA was subsidizing and supporting financially the WNBA. There were times where the WNBA was operating at a loss, but the money coming in from the NBA was keeping it afloat. That's not the case anymore, and that hasn't been the case for several years. There's been stars in the league. Cheryl Swoops, Sue Bird, Diana Taurasi, who's 41 and still playing, going on, close to 20 years in the league. But what there hasn't been, maybe for those players, is such an eye on social media and how important it is and how much of a driver it is to grow a player's reputation, their brand, their image, their importance to a team and to a league. So yes, while Caitlin Clark, generational, there are going to be stars following her. The WNBA and sponsors, social media, NIL deals in college. These are all things that are going to increase the prominence of these players and the sports. It's never going to be equal. And again, I don't say this as being a wet blanket. It's just not popularity-wise. Where there should be equality in pay, because popularity matters, women's soccer. Internationally, talking about like U.S. team, win gold medals, commensurately better than the men's team. And I can see tennis, with the stars, with the Williams sisters. You've had, in the 80s, you've had Martina Navratilova, Steffi Graf, Martina Hingis. You have Coco Gauff now. The salaries still aren't, the same for winning Wimbledon or the U.S. Open. And maybe that's a remnant of men are asked to play 5 sets, whereas women, it's a 3-set game at max. But we, society, if we're going to talk the talk of women should be paid more, pay gap, etc., you need to walk the walk, right? You need, and me, any other year, I never watched the WNBA draft because I have no skin in the game or no stake in it, but I watched some of the Elite Eight. I watched the Final Four. I watched the final. I was aware of some of the players coming out. And yes, there's so much is going to be inadvertently asked of Caitlin Clark. So much is on her shoulders. She doesn't have to be, well, she's going to be, I don't want to say great right away, but she's going to be very good right away because of how talented she is. But she doesn't have to bring Indiana championship year 1 or 2 or 3. Like, they're the number 1 pick for the reason, because they were bad. But something like 80 to 90% of Indiana's games are going to be nationally televised. There you go. There's a step in the right direction. And make sure that you're nurturing, you're promoting, and you're growing. Every year there's new talent, new stars. I'm not saying you have to invent stars, but the ones that are stars in college, prop them up more than you are. The ones that are stars in the WNBA, prop them up more than they are. Give them more face time, however you want to do it. Even though I'm in marketing and advertising, I will leave that to you, WNBA and the NCAA marketing teams. There needs to be talent first and foremost, right? And there is talent. You got to give people reasons to care. Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and others, UConn have done that. I hope, I don't anticipate, but I hope there's no fall off now as we get into the WNBA. And Angel Reese, I think, is on the Chicago team if they're not that good, or Indiana's not that good. You could be on TV, but if you're on TV and you're continually losing, people are going to gravitate towards greatness and winners. The Bulls, the Patriots, the Chiefs, the Warriors. You see them a lot because they're talented. They're on TV a lot because they're talented. They're winning. That's why you're seeing them a lot. You can, and I agree with the WNBA, forcing the stars, the Indianas, Caitlin Clark, onto TV more to get people more into it. This is one of the big 2 or 3 players in the league that they want to follow. Get her in front of folks as much as you can. I applaud that. But I think the other piece of it is you can be great, and you can be great in a silo, but team success, playoffs, etc., are going to be a part of it. So how quickly some of the stars, where they landed, their teams become, I don't want to say relevant because they are relevant, but playoff caliber, making a push. Because remember, you get into the playoffs, more games for people to watch, right? It's a math game at this point. So let's get off of the WNBA. All good things. Thought it was awesome. Aaron Rodgers recently on a podcast suggesting that the AIDS epidemic of the 1980s was engineered by the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease with the help of the federal government. Rodgers also said that this was the blueprint for the COVID pandemic, with both health crises being handled by Dr. Anthony Fauci. We know he's not a fan of him, the former chief medical advisor to the president of to both presidents of the United States, the last two. Ignoring the fact that HIV, when you do your research, and I don't know if Aaron Rodgers, he says he has, and he does research, etc., HIV originated from chimpanzees in Central Africa, with the first case being diagnosed in 1959 in the Congo. COVID, as I'm sure you're aware, it's widely believed to have originated in Wuhan, China. The first case was there late in 2019, where there is disagreement on, and there was even a U.S. investigation that there was no proof that it was a lab leak or a lab accident. Okay. Aaron Rodgers also claimed, although he walked it back, so this might have been someone just bad-mouthing him, but let's just put it out there because I'm sure you heard it. And it's just another, we'll call it a thing attributed to Aaron Rodgers, claimed that the 2012 Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting was a hoax. That the families, that the deceased, even the shooters, everybody was an actor. That it never happened. He had conspiracy theories about 9/11. And of course, one related to sports, claiming that he could come back from a torn Achilles suffered in September, come back in 4 months, should the Jets make the playoffs. He's an attention whore. He just wanted to still be relevant and part of the narrative, even though, he was looking forward to playing for the Jets and they built that team around him, and not having any sort of viable backup really knocked the Jets out of playoff consideration late in the season. But went on Pat McAfee, kept saying, that new, was it Dr. Attaché or whoever did the surgery in California was using a brace, it would speed his recovery, and then admitted after the fact, I was nowhere close to being ready. It was never wishful thinking. He's an attention whore. He likes the mic in front of him. He likes talking about himself. But because he is like that, and obviously famous, he needs to be careful with the platform that he has, or multiple platforms that he has, because generally people are uninformed morons. Not that you have people that have altars and are worshiping Aaron Rodgers. That would be ridiculous. But to some people, and unfortunately far too many, his word holds sway. And he does come out and say, I've done research, I'm no epidemiologist, but I can do research like anybody else, and this, that, and the other thing. There's doing research, and then there's doing research. You can research anything online. You can find a backwater internet website, a YouTube video, people cranking out content from their basement, from a bomb shelter if you have good Wi-Fi. People can say anything about anything. And this is what's made the internet so wonderful, but such a disappointment. At the dawn of the internet, it was believed to be the repository of human knowledge that will make the world more intelligent and smarter. And in some ways it has, but it's also made the world much dumber, and dupes and morons that will grab a headline without actually doing the research themselves. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, maybe not necessarily TikTok since that's video type stuff, but You put something out there, especially if it's false information, and we have an ex-president that is good at this as well. If you say something loud enough and enough times, people will believe it, even when it's based on nothing. Aaron Rodgers probably fancies himself as an intellectual. He may or may not be. I'm sure he's not a dumb person, but when you are pushing or falling for conspiracy theories and you're saying you're doing research on something, by definition, a conspiracy theory is essentially believing something without proof. That's why it is a conspiracy theory. Do I believe there are things that are going on, like, say, shadow governments or things that the government has covered up, and, you know, what we're doing overseas in the Middle East probably isn't the greatest stuff in the world, but that gets swept under the rug because it's all about America's interests and only putting things on TV, you know, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, whatever, Associated Press, that each respective company wants people to hear? Sure. And I'm sure our government wants us to believe, all citizens, that America is the white shining, I don't know if lighthouse is the right word, but the white shining tower, the beacon of hope on the hill that all other countries can follow. Sure. Do we have our fair share of shit that we did? Absolutely. Slavery, suppressing women's, rights and African Americans' rights for how long? The Trail of Tears, pushing Indians off the land that was theirs before colonists came along. Japanese internment during World War II, dropping bombs on Japan. Like, there are stuff that we should not be proud of as a country. It's history. You don't erase it. You don't move past it callously. You learn from it. And you hopefully don't perform the same types of things. But what Aaron Rodgers is dipping into is just that dangerous feeding information or disinformation to people and spreading disinformation could be just as dangerous as spreading a virus, right? And for someone that, I don't know if he had a thought. I mean, there are people out there, obviously, that believe the Earth's flat, that believe that the moon landing didn't exist, and there's probably thousands of that, probably dinosaurs still roam the Earth. They don't believe in evolution. Like, they're crazy, crazy stuff, right? But you can't rationalize with crazy. You can't rationalize with Aaron Rodgers. I just hope that, people just keep giving him a platform because he's going to say crazy shit. Doesn't mean folks have to fall for it, but that means you have to hold a bit of accountability and do some research for yourself. Jets, Aaron Rodgers, the gift that keeps on giving. But let's move past him. We're going to finish up with streaming platform, streaming TV. And this is something that I just learned last night. I did not know this because I don't have the streaming services that actually provide this. And what this, quote unquote, is or are channels. And apparently Peacock, which I don't have, Pluto TV, which I may have free but don't watch, and Tubi, which I don't have or may have and don't watch, offer it. And what this essentially is are actual channels on streaming services that play a certain type of show, whether it's comedies or a certain type of comedy. Apparently Peacock has The Office playing nonstop on a certain channel. Mysteries, westerns, talk shows, whatever it may be, they have them on a certain channel that people can go to that like that genre. Didn't realize it. But where it came to my attention was the announcement that Disney Plus, which I do have, is going to roll out channels for certain content, such as Star Wars, Marvel, Pixar, Disney Junior, etc. So you go to that channel, you just see those themed shows, movies, whatever it may be, played on repeat. When I first read this, I didn't really know what to think or how to feel, if I cared. It just felt like, I guess TV is coming full circle. people were cutting the cord from cable initially because of cost, right? Netflix, Prime, Apple TV, all being significantly cheaper years ago than what they are now. But per a yearly basis, Netflix for a year, or Prime for a year, or Apple TV, Disney Plus, Peacock for sure, still significantly cheaper than having a cable provider. It just is. You're obviously not getting, if you're going to most people have more than one streamer, so you're going there for a specific offering, certain movies, certain TV shows. Obviously, some streamers, when you're talking Peacock or Sling TV, stuff like that, others that have live sports, live TV, live channels, CBS, NBC, Fox, whatever it may be, that are offering that as well. But there was an interesting phrase that people have found, and I think this may be among younger folks because it feels like an attention span thing. Streamers offering channels combats choice paralysis. That there's so much stuff going on, so much content, movies, shows, whatever, that these viewers don't know what to watch. And if a streaming platform, or platforms plural, is your only source of TV, like you don't have live TV, then I guess there is all right, I'm going to go into Netflix or Prime. I want to watch something. I don't know what. I'm just going to keep flipping. I can't find anything. The way I still use, Netflix and Prime, I'm going to Netflix now, or I'm going to Prime now to watch Fallout, which I'm going to review next podcast. Or I went to Netflix I'm still watching the show Loudermilk. I watched The Three Body Problem. I'm, certain things that is I don't want to say appointment television for me, but things I know that I want to watch. I have I have a list of shows on my phone that I want to get through. I may never exhaust the list because there's probably always going to be a new show that I want to check out, or another season of a show that I'm going to keep watching. But for folks that have this choice paralysis, I just find it interesting that they're just not putting on I'm just going to put on Major League or Coming to America just to have it on as background noise. And that's what they view these channels as. That if I know I like Marvel or Pixar or The Office or comedies or dramas that Law and Order, I don't know if there's a Law and Order channel, there very well might be somewhere, that I can just put that on. I'm not really watching it, but it's background stuff. But isn't that a catch-22? If you're just putting something on for background stuff, what does it matter what you have on? Put music on. You could literally, maybe you don't put hardcore porn on, but you could literally put anything on if you just want white noise while you're doing some stuff. I do that all the time. I mean, what I basically watch every night that it's on is The Office on Comedy Central. It used to be Big Bang Theory on TBS or TNT, whichever one it's on. And I'll sometimes rotate, but I'll have that on, but I'll sit down and watch those shows. It's not like I'm doing anything. It's like I'm just going through, watching all the Big Bang Theories or Office episodes when it's on. And I know sometimes, Comedy Central will not have The Office on. They'll have Seinfeld on. It's usually not on weekends. So even though that's not a background noise thing, I kind of understand the allure of the channel's idea, because what I'm doing with those two comedy shows is essentially a channel offering. I'm going to that channel to watch that show 6 or 7 or 8 times a row before I go to bed. Usually they're on from 7 to 11. Okay. So I get it. I just don't agree, this whole choice paralysis type thing. It's interesting that people have that, but it is also interesting to me that TV is coming full circle. And I guess when you've built up your library of content like Disney has, and you have so many things, it's not just movies, but it's TV shows now for Star Wars, for Marvel. Pixar generally just shows. Disney Junior generally just shows. But when you have enough of those and you can do that, I think it's a good offering. It is more variety. You're not losing anything. You're still going to have your full inventory of shows and movies separately, but the channels are just a way to put a continuous spotlight on that. So I guess as I'm talking through this, I'm a fan of it. I see the value in it. Now, will I utilize it? I don't know. There is something, nice in a weird way, and I might not be the demographic for this. Like when I'm on cable and I'm flipping through, whether it is just regular TV channels, sports, and then you get into like the HBOs, the Showtimes, Stars, etc., Encore, that you're flipping through and you're like, oh crap, that's a movie I like. I'm 10 minutes, half hour in. Let me just put it on. I'll go around, do chores, do some work, but at least it's on. I can look up every once in a while. Like there's nice when you find, outside of a sporting event, something on that you want to watch. And I think the channel's idea is going to play into that, where if you go into Marvel, maybe they're playing an episode of Loki. Now, I'm not going to go back and rewatch Captain America and the Winter Soldier, or Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, WandaVision. But if I'm flipping through Disney Plus and it's on, I'll probably keep it on. I think for someone like me that has streamers plus cable and using cable for flipping and using streaming TV services for specific things, I don't know how much I would actually use the channel feature, but good to have. And if, the price of these offerings seemingly go up every year or every other year, you might as well give us more shit. You might as well give us more options, more variety, as long as just because you're creating those channels, it does not mean that, price has to go up because we're creating channels on Disney Plus or Netflix or Prime, whatever it may be. That I'm not cool with. But if you're going to keep raising my price anyway, you might as well give us more stuff to watch. So I will stop there. That concludes the podcast for today. Like always, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to make us part of your listening routine. WNBA, one last note on that. The draft was, I think, Tuesday, a couple days ago, so mid-April. Preseason starts mid-May. So nothing like getting these athletes on their new teams and acclimated and starting the season pretty quickly, because obviously there's a much longer gap between all other major sports than what, the WNBA has, but that might be because it's an Olympic year, so they want to start a little bit earlier, knowing that there's going to be a break in July. Beyond that, next week's podcast, we will have a plus section. I'll be going over a comic book compilation that I'm reading. I will be reviewing Fallout on Amazon Prime. Very good show, and if you're listening to this, you don't want to wait for my review, I highly recommend you watch it. We're going to be going over a full draft for the 49ers. I'm going to be doing some mock drafts between now and then. I'm going to pick one that I feel like is most representative of what I would do if I was heading up the 49ers draft room and pick selection. No trades, just making their straight 10 picks. I'm going to infuse the draft melody before a pick is made and give a brief scouting report on each pick, in addition to anything else that is obviously newsworthy from the 49ers side. So between now and when we talk again, and the podcast will drop on Monday. Until we talk again, enjoy whatever you are doing, weather warming up, especially in the Northeast. Get out there, get some vitamin D, have some fun. But like always, be happy, be healthy, stay safe, and we will talk soon. Take care.